Scoring goals in the NHL is hard. Heck, if you're like me, scoring goals in beer league is hard. But exactly how hard is it to score a goal in the NHL? Or 10 goals? Or 100 goals? I got wondering this recently when David Perron of the Detroit Red Wings scored his 300th career NHL goal. And the general reaction of the hockey world was, hey, good for him. But dude, playing a single game in the National Hockey League is hard. Scoring a single goal in the NHL is hard. Scoring 300 NHL goals or more is mind-bendingly rare. So let's have a look at the numbers and see how many players in NHL history have hit certain goal-scoring milestones. In order to do that, we need a number to work with, as in how many players have ever played in the NHL. Specifically, how many players have ever played in a single NHL regular season game. Specifically, skaters. We're gonna leave goalies out of this. We can't all be Tristan Jarry. The vast majority of goalies don't score goals. When they do, it's headline news. When a skater does it, it's what's expected. So, as of the day I am shooting this, December 5th, 2023, how many hockey players in the entire history of hockey, in the entire history of the world, have ever played in at least one NHL regular season game? The answer is 7,609. That might sound like a lot, but consider the NHL has been around for over 100 years. That, and consider that over 700 players have played in the NHL this season alone because there haven't always been 32 teams. 7,609 players have played in at least one regular season NHL game. How many of those 7,609 players have scored at least one NHL goal? The answer is 5,973. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. That's most of them. But then consider this. That means that 1,636 players who have played in at least one career NHL game haven't scored a goal. That means 21.5% of the players who have ever played an NHL regular season game haven't scored a goal. So you can work your entire life. You can train, you can sacrifice, you can go on long road trips, sacrifice weekends and parties, and come up through the junior rankings and the minors or college or whatever it is, and then you finally get the call up. You make it to the show, and then you still have a greater than 1 in 5 chance of never scoring your first career NHL goal. And you might say, well, sure, a bunch of guys only play like one game or a couple games. Of course, they're not going to score a goal. Well, consider a player like Toronto Maple Leafs defenseman William Lagesson. He's played parts of 4 seasons in the NHL, and he's played 74 career games. That might not sound like a lot, and that's an idea for another video, but it's a lot. As of the recording of this video, 0 career NHL goals. It's hard to get your first career NHL goal, man, especially playing on defense. But whatever, Steve. Okay, nearly 80% of the players who ever get a chance to play in the NHL get their first career NHL goal. Scoring 1 goal is easy. All right, well, guess how hard it is to score 10. 10 career NHL goals. That's it. 10. Lots of players have scored at least 10 goals this season already. Out of the 7,609 players to ever play a game in the NHL, 3,825 of them have reached the 10 goal mark, which means the drop from players with at least 1 NHL goal to players with at least 10 NHL goals is over 2,000 players. Barely half, just over half, 50.27% of players who have ever played in the NHL, and that number is rounded up, have at least 10 career NHL goals, which means just under half, a hair under half of players to ever play in the NHL didn't even score 10 in the league. A bunch of guys have only scored exactly 10 goals in the NHL. A lot of them are names you probably know, and a lot of them are active. Patrick Nemeth, he played 75 games in the NHL last season. Justin Barron is a young defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens. For him to have 10 goals already at 22 is actually pretty good. There's 2 different guys named Doug Barry. They just both spell Barry differently. And a few tough guys, Tony Twist, Brian McGrattan, and who could forget the man who almost became an NHL All-Star, Rory Fitzpatrick. All right, that's 10 goals. What about 50? Out of the 7,609 players to ever play in the NHL, only 2,001 of them have reached 100 goals. Now, this is a number that might be out of date by the time you watch this video because there are a lot of guys who are close, but that means that only a little under 26.3% of players who have ever touched ice in the National Hockey League have ever reached 50 goals or more. Which means if you reach 50 NHL goals, you're like in the top quarter of goal scorers all time. Dawson Mercer, a young forward for the New Jersey Devils, recently reached that plateau. He hit 50. Guys who are right on the cusp as I'm shooting this: Matt Boldy, great young player; Matthew Joseph. Mark Jankowski is maybe not a name you would associate with the top quarter of goal scorers ever, but he is. He's right there. And also add to that list Marco Scandella, right there. Leaf fans, you might like this. Guys who are sitting at 49 career NHL goals, both Jake Gardiner and Nikolai Borshevsky. Think about that. Borshevsky scored one of the most iconic Leaf goals over the last several decades. Yes, it was in the playoffs. Never reached even 50 career NHL goals. It's hard. So, okay, now let's get to 100. Triple digit, right? Out of the 7,609 players to ever play in the NHL, only 1,217 of them have scored 100 goals or more. That means that only just a hair under 16%, 15.99% of players in NHL history have reached 100 goals. If you pick 100 players from NHL history at random, odds are only 16 of them will have reached 100 goals. It's hard. You know who's already there? Andrew Mangiapane of the Calgary Flames. He's got 100 goals in 365 NHL games. That might not surprise you. But how about this? Casey Cizikas. This guy has been basically a career depth guy, fourth liner, played over 750 career NHL games. He's at 100. And you might not hear Casey Cizikas' name and immediately think top 16% of goal scorers ever, but he's in there, and he's earned it the hard way. And a guy I wanted to highlight, Brett Connolly. This guy was a 6th overall pick and largely considered like kind of a bust in some circles. I mean, when you're the 6th overall pick, everyone expects the sun and the moon, right? You're a superstar, you're gonna be in the Hockey Hall of Fame or in the conversation at very least, multiple All-Star games. I tell you what, Connolly played in 536 NHL regular season games, which most guys who've ever played in the show would take. He's scored 101 career NHL goals, which puts him in the top 16% ever. And he's won a Stanley Cup. I got news. That ain't a bust. That's a really, really good NHL career. The type of NHL career that most players would absolutely sell their skates for. Now let's go up to 200. We're creeping into bigger milestones here. Once again, 7,609 players have played in the NHL. Only 535 of them have scored 200 goals or more. If only 535 players have ever reached 200 goals or more, that means that players who score 200 goals or more in the NHL are in the top 7% of players ever in terms of goal scoring. It's pretty elite company, man. Alex DeBrincat already has 200 goals. He's played in less than 500 career NHL games. For reference, Jonathan Marchessault of the Vegas Golden Knights has played in almost 100 more games than DeBrincat, and he's sitting on 199, although he does have a Conn Smythe trophy, which I think he might prefer. How about this name? Alex Killorn. Yes, he's won multiple cups, but dude's been largely a role player on the Tampa Bay Lightning in over 800 games, but he's gotten there to 200. Brendan Morrison, Richard Zednik, Valerie Kamensky. This is the company that you find at the 200 goal tier. Now we get into 300, and this is a tier that I think is genuinely special. Like, once you get to this tier and beyond, you're talking about like stars. Guys who have probably been in the top 3 on their team in goal scoring at least once. Guys who have probably made an all-star game at least once. Only 222 out of the 7,609 players to ever play in the NHL have ever reached 300 goals. I think earlier this video I said it puts you in the top 3% of goal scorers ever. It's actually 2.9. Only 2.9% of players who ever play in the NHL reached this goal total. David Perron is the most recent player to reach that milestone, and he deserves more flowers for it, man. Like, listen to some of these names, some of whom are still playing. I can't believe it. Danny Briere, now GM of the Flyers, has 307. JVR, he's still playing with the Boston Bruins at 305. But then listen to some of the names that didn't quite reach 300, just to give you an idea of how hard it is to do this. Brad Richards, that dude won a cup, Conn Smythe trophy, 298. Leaf legend George Armstrong only had 296. Both Richards and Armstrong played over 1,000 career NHL games. Scoring goals in this league is hard. James Neal, Mike Camilleri, Jason Pominville, Brian Gionta, Simone Gagne. Those are all players who were great, and they couldn't make it to 300 career NHL goals. And you might look at some of them and go, oh, it's their teammates or the teams they were on or health and injuries. That's kind of part of it, isn't it? Because it's skill, it's longevity, and it's a little bit of luck. Probably a lot of luck on account of less than 3% of players who make the NHL are able to reach 300. Which should give you an idea of how much of a mutant Austin Matthews is, because he's played 503 career NHL games at 26 years old, and he's already at 315, which means at 26 years old, Austin Matthews is in the top 3% of goal scorers who have ever played in the NHL already. Nathan MacKinnon is almost certainly going to score 300 goals in this league. He's almost there. Nikita Kucherov is almost there, and he's got a pretty good shot at it. TJ Oshie as well. Let's kick it up a notch. 400. Scoring 400 goals in the NHL is something only 108 players have ever done. That is only 1.419% of players ever. Let's say 1.4. How about 1.42? I'll kick it up. Some of the guys who just reached that 400 goal plateau: Patrick Elias, amazing player. Marian Gaborik, John LeClaire. Anze Kopitar was the most recent guy to do it. He's sitting at 403. Shane Doan and Paul Kariya tied with 402. One of them played a lot more games than the other. They both made it. Here, I'm going to give you some incredible names. Marcus Naslund, Dave Keon, Cam Neely, Daniel Sedin, Martin St. Louis. None of them hit 400 career NHL goals. They all got very close, but none of them actually surpassed 400. Now we're talking about the elite of the elite. Like, I think most of those names I just mentioned are in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So now we're starting to reach plateaus that even guys in the Hall are not hitting. Not just defensemen either. Daniel Sedin was like a scoring, offensively gifted forward. Never hit 400 goals. That's wild. Now, this is a magic number to a lot of people. 500 goals. Only 47 players in the history of the NHL have hit 500 career goals. If that sounds minuscule, that's because it is. The number of players who scored 500 or more NHL goals compared to the list of players who have scored 400 or more NHL goals is cut in more than half. Only about 0.62% of players to ever play in the NHL have reached 500 goals. Pierre Turgeon was recently inducted into the NHL Hall of Fame. He had 515. Jean Beliveau had 507. Peter Bondra, criminally underrated, 503. And Lanny McDonald ended his career with a clean 500 goals even. Listen to some of these names, these legends. Glenn Anderson, Jean Rataille, Norm Ullman, Brian Bellows, Daryl Sittler, Sergei Fedorov all got close to 500. None of them actually hit it. Some names to watch out for: Evgeny Malkin has 481. He's almost there. Joe Pavelski has 460. If he keeps playing, he'll get there. He could get there. And Patrick Kane, this is an interesting one, sitting at 451 career goals. Will he get to 500? Ooh. We don't know. We don't know. Now, this next one is one I love because it's a guarantee you make it into the Hockey Hall of Fame. If you score 600 or more NHL goals, you're automatic into the Hockey Hall of Fame. There are only two players to ever score 600 goals who aren't in the Hall. Those two players are Alexander Ovechkin and Jaromir Jagr, and the reason neither of those guys are in the Hockey Hall of Fame yet is because they're both still playing professional hockey, albeit in different leagues. The top 0.26% of players in NHL history have reached 600 NHL goals. What's 0.26%? 20. It's 20 guys. Ever. Jerome McGinley and Joe Sakic both have 625, and it's wild because they crushed so many of their goals during the dead puck era too. Dino Ciccarelli and Yari Curry both had 601. They just made it. But Mark Recchi, the longevity, Mike Bossy, the goal-scoring brilliance, Neither of those guys were able to hit 600 goals for different reasons. Who will be next to score 600 goals? It's very likely to be Sidney Crosby. He's sitting at 565. That means he's 35 short. He could hit 600 goals this season, more likely next. But maybe that's my personal challenge to Sid himself. You can do it! The last two milestones, 700 goals. Well, this is rather elite company. Only 8 players have ever done it. That's 0.105% of players who have ever played in the NHL. Jaromir Jagr, Brett Hull, Marcel Dion, Phil Esposito, and Mike Gardner are the only players in NHL history with goal totals between 700 and 800 career NHL goals. Well, actually, just to show you what the jump is, they're the only players with between 700 and 776. Steve Yzerman, Mark Messier, Mario Lemieux, and Teemu Selanne, all of them fell short of 700 career goals. Lemieux would have just massacred it. He was at 690 in just over 900 career NHL games. He was truly, truly brilliant. But again, it's skill, which he had, didn't have the longevity. Didn't have the luck. He might have had top 2 skill in NHL history. He might have had top 1, depending on who you ask. But even he didn't reach 700 goals. It's so hard. Then 800 or more. This is the final milestone because no one has ever scored 900 goals in the NHL. 3 guys out of 7,609. I have to read what that is. 0.33094227%. Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe has 801. Alex Ovechkin has 827 and counting. We all thought he was going to catch Gretzky in a walk. It's looking a lot farther away right now as Wayne Gretzky sits on top of them all, just shy of 900 career NHL goals, 894. He put up 72 points in his final season in the NHL, but only 9 of them were goals. How are you passing Wayne the puck at every opportunity? 15! He needed 15 more goals, man. You only got him 9! That's why we still don't have a player who has ever hit 900 career NHL goals. We may never. Like, Alexander Ovechkin is our greatest hope. He's got to pick up the slack. I've seen people talk about like, whoa, Austin Matthews. He's like actually matching or greater than Ovechkin's pace. What did I tell you, man? Skill? Well, it's there. But then there's health and luck. There are over 500 goals that separate Austin Matthews from Alexander Ovechkin. So if he is going to maintain this pace, keep it up, he's got a long, long, long way to go. So there it is. That's how hard it is to score goals in the NHL. Turns out really hard. I bet you didn't know that. The next time you see a player do their little rookie lap where they skate alone by themselves, you see someone play their first career NHL game, know how rare that is. When you see them score their first NHL goal and they take the puck out of the net and they bring it to the bench, they put tape around it, write their name, they take the little picture, that's even more rare. And for that player to even hit 10 career NHL goals, only about half of players ever pull that off. So, that's our first of many in this series. I really hope you enjoyed it. But for now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you liked this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. Scoring goals is pretty hard.